The buzz started on a Monday morning. Karoline Leavitt, the sharp-tongued, no-nonsense White House press secretary under President Donald Trump's second term, had just wrapped up another fiery press briefing. The D.C. press pool was still reeling from her bold statements about media bias, economic wins, and foreign policy moves that turned more than a few heads. On the other side of the country, nestled in a sleek Manhattan studio, Jon Stewart, comedian, critic, and longtime left-leaning voice of reason to many Americans, was preparing a segment for his new late-night show. Known for his scathing monologues and wit, Stewart had set his sights on what he described as the mouthpiece of the MAGA machine, Karoline Leavitt. She's 20-something, barely out of college, and suddenly dictating global talking points? He ranted in rehearsal, as his staff chuckled behind the cameras. Come on. She reads cue cards like a TikTok influencer promoting energy drinks. The clip was already viral on Twitter before the show even aired. Headlines popped up. Jon Stewart targets Trump's press secretary in brutal cold open. Karoline Leavitt, the TikTok press secretary? But what Jon didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Karoline had been watching. And she wasn't one to take things lying down. Tuesday morning, the White House was calm as always, at least on the outside. Inside the press briefing room, the usual suspects gathered, including a few new faces. Reporters hungry for the firestorm sure to follow Stewart's takedown. Karoline, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit and carrying a simple leather folder, walked to the podium with a half smile. The cameras clicked. The microphones buzzed. Good morning, everyone, she began. Before we get to today's agenda on foreign aid and domestic job growth, I want to briefly address a performance from last night. Murmurs. A few reporters looked around. Yes, I watched Mr. Stewart's segment. I always appreciate comedy, especially when it accidentally reveals the truth. The room tensed. She continued, voice calm but eyes locked in. I may be young. I may not fit the mold the media is used to, but I'm not here to play a role. I'm here to speak the truth, defend the American people, and deliver facts, not punchlines. She paused, then added with a smirk, though if he wants to debate policy, I'd be happy to come on his show. Unscripted. Twitter exploded. Reporters began live tweeting. Karoline Leavitt claps back at Jon Stewart, calls him out for a live debate. White House press SEC offers Stewart a challenge. Unscripted. Whoa. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC all ran with it. Stewart, watching from his studio green room, raised an eyebrow. Oh, she wants smoke? He muttered, sipping his coffee. Let's give her smoke. And by the end of the day, a public challenge was issued from Stewart's team. Karoline Leavitt, join me on Friday. Live. On air. No script. No pre-questions. Just you, me, and the truth. The White House confirmed her attendance within an hour. The stage was set. America held its breath, not for a debate, but for a cultural collision. Youth versus experience. Media versus government. Sarcasm versus facts. No one could predict what Karoline was about to do. Not even Jon Stewart. But she was ready. Friday night arrived faster than anyone expected. The set of the Jon Stewart show was unusually quiet before taping. The crew, seasoned but nervous, whispered among themselves. Guests had come and gone, but this was different. This wasn't an actor or a pop star. This was the White House press secretary under Donald Trump, no less. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just bringing herself, she was bringing the full weight of the most controversial administration in modern U.S. history. Backstage, Karoline sat calmly. No PR handler hovered near her. No thick briefing binder sat on her lap. Just her, a bottle of water, and a quiet determination. You sure you're good? The producer asked, adjusting her mic. Karoline smiled. I faced the DC press pool. This'll be fun. At 8 p.m. sharp, the theme music played. Applause roared. Jon Stewart stepped out to his usual standing ovation, hands raised, grinning. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's get right to it, folks. Tonight is special, he began. He paced the stage like a veteran prizefighter entering the ring. My guest tonight is the face of the Trump White House, Karoline Leavitt. Yes, that one. You've seen the clips. You've read the tweets. And yes, she called me out. So, let's talk. The audience buzzed. And remember, he added with dramatic flair, this isn't scripted. No filters. No safe spaces. Just a good old-fashioned conversation. He turned toward the curtain. Please welcome Karoline Leavitt. Polite applause, more curious than warm, echoed through the studio as Karoline stepped out, composed and confident. She shook Jon's hand and took her seat. The tension was immediate. Jon leaned forward. So, Karoline, you watched the segment? I did, she replied. I think you were funnier back in 2006, but hey, nostalgia sells. This from the crowd. Jon smirked. Okay, sharp start. But let's talk about you. You're 20-something, speaking on behalf of the most powerful man in the world. What makes you qualified to tell Americans what the truth is? Karoline met his gaze. I don't tell people what the truth is. I show them facts and they decide. My job isn't about being liked, it's about being clear. And I've got a thick skin, Jon. You calling me a TikTok influencer? Cute. But what I say impacts foreign policy and national security. What you say gets turned into memes. The crowd gasped, some laughed. Jon waved it off. You're good. I'll give you that. But let's not pretend. You dodge questions like Neo in the Matrix. You speak in sound bites. Are you really being transparent, or are you just performing? Karoline leaned in slightly. Are you? You sit behind a desk, cherry-pick clips, and package your outrage with a punchline. You claim to speak truth to power, but only when that power fits your politics. Where were your monologues when gas prices were soaring under Biden? When border towns were overwhelmed? Selective outrage is still outrage, Jon. The audience was quiet now. Not hostile, just stunned. Jon shifted in his seat. Fair. But here's the thing, your boss lies. Routinely. Boldly. And you defend him. Doesn't that make you a part of the problem? Karoline nodded slowly. Let's talk about lies. The Trump administration didn't create the swamp, we exposed it. And you want to talk about deception? How about the media's collusion on disinformation stories before elections? Or suppressing crime data because it made certain cities look bad? You're focused on one man, I'm focused on the country. A single clap rang out from the audience. Then another. And another. Jon tried to interject, but Karoline pressed on. You don't have to like Trump. But millions of Americans, hardworking, freedom-loving people, believe in his vision. When you mock me, you're not just mocking a spokesperson. You're mocking them. Their voices. Their values. And that's the real punchline, Jon. You're laughing at the people you claim to care about. Boom. The audience was frozen. Even Jon sat back, blinking. The energy in the room had shifted. The smug humor was gone. What remained was tension and respect. And Karoline? She hadn't even raised her voice. Jon Stewart wasn't used to being challenged on his own turf, especially not with this kind of composure. For years, he'd dissected presidents, press secretaries, and pundits with sarcastic flair and intellectual jabs. But tonight, Karoline Leavitt wasn't fumbling. She wasn't dodging. She was winning over the room, one unapologetic sentence at a time. He chuckled nervously and leaned forward again. All right. That was solid, he said, gesturing to the crowd. But let me ask you this, Karoline. You talk about media bias and public trust, but the administration you represent has attacked journalists, downplayed science, and alienated half the country. How do you square that with your claims of transparency? Karoline didn't blink. I square it with results, Jon. Record job growth. Lowest unemployment among Black and Hispanic Americans. Energy independence. Border control. Are we perfect? No. But we didn't call parents domestic terrorists for showing up at school board meetings. We didn't shut down debate under the guise of misinformation. We didn't criminalize opposing views, we amplified them. Some in the crowd started to clap again. Jon's face tightened. But it's also divisive, he replied, clearly trying to regain the narrative. You guys have turned patriotism into a culture war. Do you really think America is better when we're yelling at each other? Karoline nodded. I don't want yelling. I want truth. But what's more divisive, calling for strong borders or calling half the country semi-fascist? What's more extreme, defending the Constitution or canceling people for quoting it? The crowd murmured and Stewart didn't interrupt this time. Karoline's voice was steady, not aggressive, just clear. I don't come from a political dynasty, Jon. I come from a working-class family in New Hampshire. My parents didn't raise me to hide from criticism, they raised me to stand tall and speak plainly. That's all I'm doing here. And if that threatens your narrative? Then maybe the narrative was broken to begin with. A full half of the audience clapped now, many of them left-leaning viewers who had only tuned in to see her stumble. Instead, she was pulling them in. Jon changed tactics. So what, you think Trump's the savior of free speech? Come on. The man's banned people from press briefings, mocked the disabled, and told over 30,000 lies. Karoline remained calm. He's human. He's flawed. But he never pretended to be a saint. The American people don't need saints, they need someone who fights for them. And despite the media's efforts to destroy him, he's still standing. We're still standing. That says something. Jon looked at her hard. You really believe all this, don't you? Karoline looked him square in the eye. I believe in America. I believe in free speech, even yours. I believe in second chances. And I believe this country is sick of smug elites pretending to be the conscience of the nation while ignoring the people who built it. The studio was dead silent. And then, applause. Louder. Stronger. Unmistakable. Jon Stewart, caught off guard, gave a small smile. Wow. Okay. I didn't expect this. Karoline returned the smile, but only slightly. Maybe that's the problem, Jon. You underestimate people who disagree with you. The show cut to a commercial. But America had already seen what it came to see. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just a spokesperson. She was a storm. It's when a farmer in Iowa or a single mom in Detroit doesn't have to apologize for loving their country. It's when people don't feel silenced on campus or canceled at work for holding conservative values. And yes, success is when the press doesn't treat patriotism like a punchline. Jon nodded, surprisingly thoughtful. You're a good communicator, he admitted. That's probably why Trump put you in front of the mic. Karoline smiled. He put me there because I don't flinch. Laughter, light but respectful, broke through the tension. As the show wound down, Jon tried one final jab. You know, Karoline, some people think you're just part of a larger machine. Just a very well-packaged distraction. Without missing a beat, Karoline replied. And some people think comedy's dead because it became propaganda in a blazer. Boom. The crowd erupted. Jon threw his hands up in mock surrender. Okay, you got me. The two stood up, shook hands. The cameras faded to the outro, but the fire had just begun to spread. Within hours of the episode airing, social media exploded. Clips of Karoline's zingers went viral on X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The hashtags #KarolineClapsBack and #JonVSKaroline trended for 2 straight days. Fox News, Daily Wire, and Newsmax praised her for standing her ground. Surprisingly, even some centrist and left-leaning commentators admitted they were impressed by her poise. Ben Shapiro tweeted, Karoline Leavitt walked into Jon Stewart's lair and walked out without a scratch. Absolute masterclass. Megyn Kelly posted, whether you love her or hate her, tonight Karoline proved why she's a force to be reckoned with. But perhaps the most unexpected comment came from Bill Maher, who said during a podcast, I don't agree with everything she said, but that was real debate. Jon got served. It was refreshing to see someone from the Trump camp who wasn't yelling or playing victim, just fighting smart. On the flip side, legacy media outlets scrambled to reframe the interview. CNN called it a concerning display of rhetorical manipulation. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow stated, she's polished, yes, but also dangerous. Beware of charm used to disguise authoritarianism. Karoline wasn't fazed. In fact, she welcomed the scrutiny. Back at the White House, Trump was watching. He stood in the West Wing residence with several aides around him, sipping Diet Coke, replaying the interview on a giant screen. That's my girl, he said, beaming. She's got more guts than half the Senate. Karoline, meanwhile, was already back at work. She declined most interviews the next day, tweeting instead, they expected a punchline. I brought the facts. That's the difference between entertainment and leadership. America was divided but also energized. In an era where public discourse often devolved into screaming matches or sarcastic takedowns, Karoline Leavitt had delivered something rare. A calm, brutal, beautiful counterpunch. And people left, right, and center couldn't stop talking about it. In the days following the now legendary interview, Karoline Leavitt's name became more than a trending hashtag. She became a symbol. For conservatives, she was the personification of grace under fire, a new generation of leaders who could take the blows from the cultural elite and return them with precision. For moderates and independents, she was proof that not every voice from Trump's camp was a caricature of rage and reaction. Even some liberals grudgingly admitted she had substance. She had arrived. But with fame came fire. Within a week, mainstream publications started to dig. Old college essays were unearthed. Anonymous sources came forward with weekly substantiated claims of insensitive comments from group chats she was never confirmed to be in. Opinion pieces tried to link her style to authoritarian communication tactics. There were whispers, ridiculous but persistent, that she had been coached by AI algorithms. Karoline didn't flinch. She held her daily press briefings with the same sharp poise. Every time a reporter tried to bait her, she delivered facts. Every time someone tried to shout her down, she responded with grace. Her approval ratings, yes, even for a press secretary, skyrocketed among voters under 35. Late-night comedy hosts tried to spin the Stewart interview as a one-off anomaly. But their punchlines rang hollow. The internet had seen it with their own eyes. Karoline had entered a lion's den and walked out leading the pack. Inside the White House, the mood was different. Trump, revitalized by the public response, began leaning more on her. He had seen something in Karoline few others had, the ability to resonate beyond his base. She wasn't just a press secretary anymore. She was becoming something more. One evening, Trump called her into the Oval Office. The sun had just dipped behind the White House, casting golden light through the historic windows. "You were magnificent," he said, motioning for her to sit. "Thank you, Mr. President." "No, really," he continued. "I haven't seen someone dismantle Jon Stewart like that since, well, ever. You didn't lose your cool. You didn't retreat. You made him look like the partisan he's become." Karoline stayed silent, waiting. "I want you to consider something," Trump said, leaning in. "How do you feel about 2028? She blinked. "You mean?" He grinned. "Vice President. Maybe even more. You've got something special. You're sharp. You're real. You're not a legacy kid from Harvard or Yale. You speak like people do in kitchens, not think tanks." Karoline's heart thudded, but her face remained steady. "Mr. President," she replied, "I'm honored. But I'm here to serve now, not chase power." Trump laughed. "Good answer. That's why you're dangerous to them." She left the office that night with more resolve than ever. But outside the walls of power, something even bigger was happening. A group of young college students in Ohio posted a clip of her exchange with Jon Stewart, overlaying it with the caption, "She said what we've been afraid to say in class." It went viral. Thousands of other young Americans followed suit, sharing stories of being silenced in classrooms, at work, or on social media. Karoline unknowingly had sparked a quiet revolution, not of ideology, but of courage. And Stewart? The comedian found himself at the center of unexpected introspection. During a podcast with his longtime friend and writer, he admitted, "I thought she was going to be just another talking head. But she made me think. And maybe that's what real debate is supposed to do." He added with a chuckle, "She beat me fair and square. Still stings though." In a rare moment of humility, he even tweeted, "Disagree with her politics, but Karoline Leavitt showed up and brought the heat. Respect." The internet lit up again. And Karoline? She stayed focused. No gloating. No victory tour. Just back to work. Behind the podium. Answering the questions. Taking the heat. With her signature calm, clever jabs, and razor-sharp facts. She wasn't there to be liked. She was there to tell the truth. Because, as she tweeted 2 weeks after the interview, truth doesn't need a standing ovation. It just needs someone brave enough to say it. Years later, when documentaries were made about the cultural shift in American politics during the 2020s, one clip was always included. A sharp, composed young woman sitting across from one of the most famous liberal comedians in history, and absolutely dismantling him. Not with rage. Not with memes. But with truth. Karoline Leavitt didn't just survive the Stewart showdown. She defined it. And in doing so, she changed the game forever.